Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the September 2nd, 2021 City Council regular meeting to order. Will Deputy Mayor Matt Mahoney please lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Let the record show that all council members are present. Councilmember Martinelli does not have access to a computer today with a camera on it. So for tonight, we are making an exception, but his votes will be called for independently. Okay, are there any correspondence?
No correspondence, Mayor.
Samantha Scow, Kate Has No Home Here campaign. Paul Nelson, Skate Park Repairs. Kayleen Moon, Marina Dock Repair. Michelle McAllister, Kate Has No Home Here, Washington. Jenny and Lance Meyer, The Children Are Our Future. Heidi Flayhaven, Chaos Programs and Before After Care. David Denino, ARPA Funds, Loss of Revenue Calculation for the City of Des Moines. Ted Dobiak, SLFRP item. Azeb Hagos, Parks Master Plan and American Rescue Plan Funds. Jose Johnson, ARPA Fund Recommendations, Transit Housing and Alternate Funds for Police and Marina. Joshua Lee, ARPA Funding. Sandra Mock, Please Take Some Time. Rebecca Stapleton, Ideas to Best Utilize the $9 million federal grant. Harry Steinmetz, ARPA Priority. Rick Johnson, Ms. Ben's comments. And the following have provided written public comment relative to Steve Edmonston's August 30th, 2021 email proposing airport community public health and environmental rescue plan and use of ARPA funds. Steve Edmonston, Carrie Allman, Kelby Blosser, Sheila Brush, By Skies Puget Sound, David Clark, Valerie Constantino, Jane Davis, Doreen Harper, Mandy Keith, Bill Linscott, Patty Linscott, Lori McEachern, Denise Moore, Marnie Savoris, Susan White, Deanna Clifford Schroeder, Alice Dean Damaschio, Sherry Frankfurter, Alina Rogers, Jamie Brown and Patricia Phillips, Sherry Berber, Kathleen Oljar, and William Island. And Mayor, we have a few signed up for public comment, and the first person is.
Before you let him in.
Oh, sorry. Karen Kanaki.
Okay, thank you. Before we go to public comment, I'd like to make clear that each person will have 3 minutes to speak, and anyone making personal, impertinent, slanderous remarks or who become boisterous, threatening, or personally abusive will be muted and removed from the meeting. Having said that, I'm sorry, you said our first person was?
Karen Panaki.
Karen Panaki, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
I don't really need 3 minutes. I was just concerned about the marina development project, and I don't know a lot about it. I don't know how it's going to affect my property values. I am right above the marina and right next to where you're doing this. I'm concerned about the safety of our residents, you know, with the stairs going in right next to us, and our lower areas can easily be accessed that way, although we have security in the front. We do not are not being provided security, as far as I know, along the sides with someone just jumping onto the balcony and coming on in. I'm also very concerned about what it's going to do to the parking. So these are some of my concerns about it. I have many more, but I'm still in the process of researching the whole project. So that's all I have to say.
Well, thank you very much. There will be more information forthcoming, and there's quite a bit of information both on our website and in other locations. So thank you very much, though, for your comments tonight. And the next person would be
Mayor, the next person is Timothy Wicks.
Timothy Wicks. Mr. Wicks, I believe you're on mute.
Oh, okay, unmute. Okay.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay,
Yeah.
I mean, okay, just like the previous Karen was speaking, we live in South Shore condominiums, which is right above the the marina project, and our concern is, of course, the view blockage. We're on the 3rd floor. It's a 4-story building, and I guess the tallest building that's going to be built is like 3 stories, and it's kind of hard to see from the artist drawings exactly, you know, an accurate kind of placement of the buildings. I kind of have an idea. I wish that somehow we could have a clear idea of how tall, you know, how far it's going to be set back or close to our property. So that's kind of what I was concerned about, basically, and the property values. Personally, I mean, I'd like to just see what it looks like, also the time frame that we're dealing with. I think it's quite a large project, and it probably will be done in stages, but just basically curious about those three or four topics.
And the steps.
And also the steps. I think the steps go right down from 223 kind of straight down, and it looks like there's a traversing like switchbacks in front of part of our building. But it doesn't, from the rendition that Skylab presented, which we saw on the website, it looks like it's hard to tell if it's going like from the one end of South Shore condos to like the middle of it, and then switching back, so forth, with park benches and decorative landscaping, or if it's going the whole direction. So that's basically kind of what we're looking at here. Seems like the project looks pretty good, but we're more concerned about, with us, more concerned about view blockage, because we have a phenomenal view. So
Thank you.
that's it.
Thank you. And we do hear you. The staff is reporting all those concerns, and they will be addressed over time.
Oh, can I just add one more thing? Was like some of the plantings that they had planted, or those could be changed, but they look like they're putting, from the rendition of the drawing, like trees that, you know, we could grow really high, which would also be maybe smaller bushes or something that would be closer to the ground, that would still be beautiful and recapture the rain and the runoff from the airport, but wouldn't also impede anybody's view. So those are our concerns.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I think it's important for everybody to understand that we have architectural renderings. They're artists' conceptual drawings. Nothing is absolutely confirmed at this time. The next person.
Mayor, we have a few who indicated they wanted to give public comment, but they're not on. So I'd just like to read their name and the subject into the record.
Please.
Zeb Hagos, Marina Development. Barb Piguet, Marina redevelopment proposals needs current input from city residents. Darshan Sawant, attend council meeting, and Joe Schott, adaptive use building. And that concludes all of public comment, Mayor.
Just to let you know, I'm Darshan Sawant, so we live together, so I'm over here. So
Oh, I think we have somebody, Darshan.
I'm here with Tim. So I mean, those were our questions. So that's it. Yeah.
These are Tim Hicks.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
So at this point, I believe we have completed public comment. And that takes us forward to the city manager's report.
Point of order, Mayor, if I may. I'm sorry, I keep meaning to mention this. Is there any way to control the order in which our faces appear on the screen? I just hear concerns that, like, you know, they want to see the council and the city manager at the top, and guests and such, you know,
I know
nearby.
individually you can control it on your own screen. On the screen in here,
What shows up on the video is basically, when people watch later. That's all.
I understand what you're saying. Yeah. Let's see.
I know, I'm not saying for right now, but, just give it a think. I've heard this several
Well,
times
it's
now.
it's a manual effort.
Correct, and then because Councilmember Martinelli will not have his camera on, he will not be shown. It's only who has a camera on is shown.
Only those with a camera on can be
Yeah.
seen.
So while he's present, he will not be shown up here.
Martinelli, Councilmember Martinelli will not be seen because although he is present at the meeting, he is, his technology at this point, for this meeting only does not have a camera. So, like I said in the beginning of the meeting, I will call him by vote. But at this point, I believe you can see everyone else on screen, and the city manager and the city attorney, and Susan Cesar, our chief strategic officer. So we have made that adjustment for this evening.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, for those who are watching this on a computer on Zoom, it's a drag and drop. You put your cursor over and you can move those to whatever you want to see. But that is limited to those who are on computer. Okay, I'm going to take us forward to our city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. 3 items that I want to talk about tonight. One is in order. So let me talk a little about, there's a consent agenda item relative to an extension of the contract for the consultants who are helping our city, the cities of Burien, Normandy Park, and SeaTac in our preparation potentially of response to the SAMP environmental documents, the SAMP being the Sustainable Airport Master Plan. And I want to give you a little bit of background. We had one of the START meetings, which are the community, city, commercial interaction with the airport about issues affecting the quality of both air quality, noise, and health in general. And that was last Wednesday. And it was a very interesting meeting. We had a consultant from Boston University who's working with USC, MIT, and University of Washington on ultrafine particle analysis and determination ultimately of some type of remediation. And so we've worked very closely with Representative Orwell on this, as with other members of the 33rd, especially Senator Kaiser, and Congressman Adam Smith has picked this up in the Congress. And basically, what's going on is that there is an effort to provide like enhanced HVAC and filtration systems in the schools. There is also, I'd heard that Councilmember Harris had recommended some type of mobile analysis unit, which could go to different locations. And they had done a lot of the analysis. And so it's very interesting. They're going to do regressions on this. I asked them questions about kind of the parameters on the variables and what they thought was significant and how the significance of specific elements of their study would be applied to specific airports, and would they be generalized or were they, specific. Peter Phillips asked a couple of questions about community involvement, and Bob Leonard made a great comment, which I think sums up everyone's feeling, is that this is not the time for the airport to expand when you're already at capacity. But at any rate, I was pleased to see that our delegation was the most engaged in the START at that point. And the airport talked a little about their schedule for the SAMP review. And they're a couple of years behind. There are 2 parts to their process for environmental, and they were talking about doing this fourth quarter 2021, or possibly put it over to first quarter 2022. So what you have on the consent agenda is just an extension, which all of the cities are doing with our consultants. The first step for the environmental review is through what they call NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act, which is a federal requirement for environmental assessment. And that is something the airport will be doing, and they will provide the NEPA to the FAA, who will determine the appropriateness of that document. The next level, which is much more affects us in terms of access and an opportunity to comment, is through SEPA, State Environmental Policy Act. And the review of the SEPA is done at the Department of Ecology in state government. And then there's a review process and there's an appeal process. And so the engagement of our consultants is critical, as the other cities have agreed and are also moving forward to extend the contract, which would have been completed had it not been for COVID. But the issue is that the airport continues to insist that they are looking at, quote, near-term projects. And we are absolutely convinced, based on the law, that they need to look at the cumulative impacts of the entire project, all of the master plan elements that they're talking about. So that's going to be a point of contention, potentially, or at least a point of discussion with the airport when they release the SEPA and when our consultants move forward to review that. And in the end, we will have a product that is supported by all the Normandy Park, Burien, CTAC, and our SEPA officials. Susan is our SEPA official. She's leading the process through which we're coordinating all of this. And then we will have input from our consultants who wrote the scoping comments originally. We will have the SEPA officials and city councils weighing in on where we stand. So we think there's strength in numbers, and we're looking forward to being able to dig into this at some point as the airport continues to become more active. So that was one thing. We'll be happy to answer any questions about that. The items on consent. Let's go to surplus property. So I'm going to put up a picture here that Max gave us an overview of. This parcel is right at the corner of 216th as it leads to merge with Marine View Drive. Used to be an old car wash. It's been vacant for quite a while. It's about 12,840 feet. The assessor value is about $333,000. This was approved for sale a number of years ago by City Council. And because of the recession and the recovery from the recession and the reduction in land values, nothing was ever done with this property. It's just continued to be in the city portfolio, but unutilized. There's apparently interest in development potential for this parcel, along with several others. And so what we are letting council know tonight is that we intend to list this property for sale. We cannot consummate a sale without council approval. So at the point at which there's an offer or interest, we will bring that back to council for a discussion about whether to proceed or not. But I wanted you to be aware that this is going to be put on the market. And finally, I want to talk about a marina update. And so let me, Bonnie, you've got, yeah. Okay, so the front page you're looking at, development opportunity at Des Moines Marina, has been a process of the last 12 years or so. And we finally yesterday issued the request for qualifications for development of the parcel just north of where the marina steps are going to go, and potentially for the marina steps. So we're issuing that into the private sector. That action was authorized on September 26, 2019. Councilmember Bangs, after a presentation by our consultants, made the motion to prepare and issue an RFQ for a private developer for marina redevelopment. Councilmember Nutting seconded it, and council voted 7-0 to support that action. And then we ran headfirst into COVID, and decided we needed to wait for the economy to recover strength, which now it has more strength than it's had. And yesterday we were able to issue the RFQ. We will send it to council tomorrow with links to a new website that we have called marinasteps.com. That has a drone tour of the city on it and a number of pieces of information, many documents presented to council, any actions council's taken, and the RFQ itself. But we just wanted to alert you to that and then just spend a couple of minutes on marina redevelopment where we are right now. So if we could go to the next slide. Destination by the Sound. This is what we're trying to build and enhance the access of the marina to the region and even internationally. And the marina steps will be a critical access component between the marina and the downtown. So just some pictures of what this all looks like moving forward. This was a important slide that we used at the open house at the Yacht Club in September 2019, when over 300 people attended, many of them who live along the condos or apartments above the marina. And this was just an identification of, for the city and for residents of the city, you know, the value of creating this central public open space and the distance in walking from their homes. And you can see the amount of land that's covered. And for 15 minutes, you can get almost the entire downtown can get down to the marina. But that was an important piece of input. People put bullet points on this. We didn't show that slide, but they put bullet points where they lived so we could see kind of what their accessibility was going to be. Next. So this is just an overview of conceptually the steps. And there's two parts to this. There's the marina steps and the building to the north. That is what is included in the RFQ for development. Okay. At the same time, we've been very conscientious to try and integrate improvements to the marina with development of the land side. And it's important to note, one thing that we did, for example, was we transferred responsibility for the north bulkhead in the parking lot from the marina to the general fund. So we're putting $12 million into the renovation of the bulkhead, and that money none of that money comes from the marina. It's all coming from the city to enhance the infrastructure and the integrity of that infrastructure. Just a point to be made. It's a partnership. Then you can see that the steps themselves, there'll be a water feature coming down to 23rd. We've talked about that before, the bioswale. Also, there'll be switchbacks on the hillside to allow walkers, strollers, you know, joggers, whatever, to be able to take advantage of access to the marina from up above. And I want to focus a little bit on the development of the south, which we call the adaptive purpose building. You can see it there next to CSR. It will not impede views from South Shore condominiums, and we will hold public events to familiarize people with what we're attempting to do. But first of all, there would be potentially retail on the north side of that building. People can come down, they can take one of the switchbacks, get to the building, have coffee, whatever. We're anticipating some type of green roof on at least a portion of the building. The building will be adjacent to the hillside. It may actually help shore up the foundation, of the condominiums in terms of making sure that that they're secure. And people from this building will not have access to South Shore condominiums. It will not be flush with anyone's balcony or back access. Internally within that, go to the next one. Yeah, so what we're showing here, this is what the building looks like. The building on the left is the one to the north that's part of the RFQ. You can see where the steps are. You can see the switchbacks. You can see the building. On the right, that the glass part, that's more retail. That will provide an accessible seasonal market overhang and access for the farmers market throughout the year. The building, the portion of it to the south will be dry boat storage. And that will be as a result of reconfiguring the marina, downsizing the number of docks and the number of slips from about 800 to 500. A lot of those boats will be smaller boats. They deserve and will have a place that they can locate if they choose. And what we anticipate doing with that structure is not only have it'll be covered, so that will help with the noise. We're also going to look for electrification for the forklifts that get the boats, so there will be no sound associated with the movement of traffic within that building. And all of this will be shared with the public before anything happens. This is all conceptual, but it became clear that we needed to do this if we were going to do improvements to the docks. And some of those docks are once again in the situation the bulkhead was in, where they're at great risk of failing. And that would be extremely environmentally a disaster, in terms of capital, a disaster, and in terms of being able to maintain a resource for our boaters, that would be a disaster. So I think, is there one more? Yeah, and this is a picture of potentially what the building to the building to the south looks like. You can see where the steps come down. But this creates a gathering place for the city, fulfills economic development, maritime improvements, landside improvements, environmental stewardship, and just generally an improvement of our interface with the sound and access for our community and other communities, for people to come to Des Moines, hopefully spend money, and enjoy the wonderful asset and resources that we have. I just wanted to give you a brief update on that. And that's, we will be back with the results of the RFQ. You can look at it. And that closes, the response date closes October 5th. And at that point, we'll do some recommended selections, and we'll engage council and ultimately a decision as to which developer we want to select. So with that, thank you for your time. Take any questions if you have them. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Oh, excuse me, Michael, I think Councilmember Banks had a question.
Just really quick, Michael, remind me that piece of property on 216th, you said was zoned commercial, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
Susan, I think I believe that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Mayor, if I may?
Yes,
Um,
J.C. Ayers.
Yeah. Thank you for that, City Manager. Do you expect to get multiple proposals?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have this will be sent to a number of potential developers, and fortunately for Des Moines, and a good sign for Des Moines, is that we're looking at upper tier developers, very significant on the development map. But one of the things that Robert, our consultant, myself, and others know from this process, all you need is one. But we anticipate getting, I would say, I'm not going to say a number, but I think we anticipate a strong response for this. There are very few marinas anywhere left to redevelop. And but we will absolutely keep the council informed as we receive input. And then we'll go through some type of whittling down process.
Okay, but I mean, your expectation is that it will be a non-zero number.
Yes.
No,
That's not, my hope is that it is more than zero. My great fear is that it's zero. So, but we've had enough interest that I think it'll be a non-zero number.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. So at this point, Michael, you've concluded your report. So we will go forward to the consent calendar. Will the clerk please read the consent calendar?
Item 1, approval of vouchers. Item 2, approval of minutes. Item 3, National Preparedness Month. Item 4, Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. Item 5, National Recovery Month. Item 6, acceptance of Washington Traffic Safety Commission grant, Des Moines Municipal Court, DUI Court. Item 7, consultant contract amendment for SeaTac Airport Sustainable Airport Master Plan Environmental Review and Analysis. Item 8, 2021 WASPIC Mental Health Field Response Team Grant Ratification Grant Acceptance. Item 9, City Computer Data Backup Infrastructure Update or Upgrade, sorry. Item 10, Goods and Services Contract with PAL American Security, Inc. Item 11, Adoption of 2022 to 2027 Capital Improvement Plans. And that concludes the consent calendar, Mayor.
Thank you. As I call for the motion to approve the consent calendar, I see Councilmember Nutting's hand up.
So moved, Mayor.
Second.
Thank you. The motion was made by Councilmember Nutting and seconded by Councilmember Bangs. Is there any council member who wishes to remove an item?
Yes, Mayor, I would like to remove item 10, if possible.
Okay. All right, item 10 has been removed. So with that, we will move forward with the consent calendar, excuse me, covering all items except for item 10. All those in favor, please raise your hand until I call your name. Okay, I see Councilmember Nutting, Councilmember Bangs, Councilmember Harris, Councilmember Buxton, Deputy Mayor Mahoney, and myself. Councilmember Martinelli, verbally, are you in favor? Are you a yay?
Yes.
Thank you. I do see the hand, but I don't know who's behind it, so I have to ask. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so that takes us to item number 10, Goods and Services Contract with PAL American Security. And it was pulled by Councilmember Harris. So Councilmember Harris, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Hopefully this will be quick. I may have missed something, but is there any performance requirement in the contract? I've just heard from a number of residents that they're concerned that the guy doesn't show up sometimes, punctually to lock and unlock the gates. And is there, any way to basically, ensure that that happens, or any kind of penalty for, not meeting that requirement?
Thank you, Councilmember Harris. I can help a little bit on this. PAL American is a company that has overtaken our old company, Puget Sound Security. And before that, it was, oh my gosh, I can't think of the name of it offhand. I apologize. But since PAL American has taken over, they have a good, strong team. They're doing much better than Puget Sound Security did in the past. Their management staff is on top of things. All my requests that I put out forward for changing times, for adding anything, for special requests and everything else have really, really come forward, and they've shown a really strong interest. So to be honest, probably not in the contract for a performance evaluation, but right now we've been pretty happy with them.
Okay, so they've been responsive and
yes.
I'm just, it just sounds like a chronic thing. People,
sure.
I don't know. I'm at the marina a lot, and
I appreciate your comments, because yes, I mean, before PAL America took over Puget Sound, we did have some hiccups, but they've been straightened out quite well, and I'm pretty happy with them right now.
I see a hand from City Attorney Tim George.
Yes, I can speak to the Section 3A allows the city to withhold payment if there's any defective work or services. And then also Section 6 allows the city to terminate the contract with 30 days notice. So if there were an issue that we couldn't resolve through discussions, we could terminate the contract.
Okay, with that discussion complete, is there any other comment on this item? Okay, we have a motion to approve the goods and services contract with Pal America Security for security services at the Marina Beach Park and the city's Redondo facility for a fixed amount of $72,366.60, and authorize the city manager to sign the agreement substantially in the form submitted. I will make that motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have 3 seconds. I believe I saw Councilmember Bangs. So any further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand till I call your name. Okay, Councilmember Nutting, Councilmember Bangs, Councilmember Harris, Councilmember Buxton, Deputy Mayor Mahoney, myself. Councilmember Martinelli, your vote, please.
Yes, yay.
Okay. This passes 7-0, as did the consent. So this takes us forward. But before I go forward, I will read the proclamation summaries into the record. Please bear with me. We have 3. Now, therefore, the Des Moines City Council hereby declares September as National Preparedness Month and urges all Des Moines residents to make sure that their families are prepared for an emergency, prepare a disaster supply kit, and create a family emergency plan. Now, therefore, the Des Moines City Council hereby proclaims the month of September as Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. And now, therefore, to help more people achieve and sustain long-term recovery, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy, and the City of Des Moines invites all residents to participate and proclaim the month of September as National Recovery Month. Now, this takes us to the first of our public hearings. First public hearing is SV 2021-01, street vacation of public right-of-way within the city of Des Moines, known as South 219th Street, South 220th Street, South 221st Street, South 224th Street, and 30th Avenue South to Sound Transit for the Federal Way Link extension. The staff presentation will be given by our civil engineer, Civil Engineer 2, Mr. Tommy Owen. I will now open the public hearing and request that the staff give the presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Tommy Owen, Civil Engineer for Engineering Services. I'll be presenting the public hearing for SB 2021-01, vacation of public right-of-way known as South 219th Street, South 220th Street, South 221st Street, South 224th Street, and 30th Avenue South. Next slide, please. So we'll start off with some quick facts. Sound Transit has submitted street vacation applications for all the right-of-way that I just mentioned. The vacation of this right-of-way is necessary for the construction of the Federal Way Link Extension project, which is currently under construction. The city has entered into agreements with Sound Transit over the past few years. And per those agreements, Sound Transit is responsible for right-of-way improvements at those street ends. Shown here is an example at 220th Street. The city would vacate the area that is shown to your right in that hatched area on the right side of that cul-de-sac. In order to construct all the improvements such as curb, gutter, and sidewalk, there would also be a dedication involved in this. So Sound Transit would dedicate the north and south side of that cul-de-sac to ensure that all right-of-way improvements are located within the city right-of-way. Next slide, please. Back one, I think. There you go. All the vacation areas are bordered by Sound Transit properties, so no other property owner approval was required for these. Staff also contacted all local utilities and received no objections to the street vacations. And finally, the right-of-way to be vacated is classified as a type A right-of-way since it has been used for public transportation purposes, so it will require compensation to the city. Next slide, please. So to wrap things up, this street vacation meets the requirements per state law and is consistent with previous agreements with Sound Transit. As I mentioned earlier, staff has contacted all utilities and received no objections. It is therefore that administration recommends the city council enact the draft ordinance. Next slide, please. And so I've provided the suggested motions for your convenience, and that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. It is now time for the public comment portion of this. Has anyone signed up to speak?
No, Mayor.
Okay, seeing that no one has signed up to speak, council, do you have any questions? Okay, I see Deputy Mayor Mahoney. I see Councilmember Buxton. Okay, Deputy Mayor Mahoney, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. Tommy, can you talk a little bit about the lighting and security at the end of these cul-de-sacs for us?
So as a part of the right-of-way improvements at these locations, there would be street lighting that would be installed. I don't know if there's anything else to add there at the end.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Mahoney, do you have another question?
Well, I guess it would be to somebody on the police force. Do they have any kind of plan to provide enforcement in those areas just to ensure the safety of those neighbors? Or have they got that far yet?
I don't know that we have someone from law enforcement on the call at this time.
Okay.
Councilmember Mahoney, maybe I can speak to that. I know that each of the improved cul-de-sacs will have curb gutter, sidewalk, and sort of a road marker terminating the end of the road, whereas some of our challenges historically with dumping or unwanted trespassing, there's been no hard edge, and so I anticipate it with the added lighting and the curb gutter, sidewalk, and in the road markers that we'll see less of an issue there. We may need to ask for PD's assistance if we have unauthorized vehicles parking there. We'll kind of approach that if operational issues come up.
Those would be the answers that the people I spoke to up there wanted to hear. So thank you.
Okay, and as a reminder, and I will recognize Councilmember Banks. I saw her hand come up. As a reminder, this is questions only, so please refrain from comment. And then after Councilmember Banks, I will go to Councilmember Harris, but I believe City Manager Matthias had a comment.
Yeah, Brandon essentially answered it, but one thing is that there's always close coordination between Public Works and our police department relative to improvements or changes in roadways or accessible areas. So I know that will continue.
Thank you, City Manager Matthias. Councilmember Buxton, do you have a question?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. So could you clarify why Rule 26A is being suspended for this and not, and the recommendation is to not go to a second reading?
That's pretty typical with our street vacations like this. It's our recommendation. If you want to take it to a second reading, you can certainly do that.
Okay, and then secondarily, just a clarification on the CenturyLink easement, it's being granted and it's just in process.
Yeah, so we'll have to work with Sound Transit and CenturyLink to come up with an appropriate easement at that 224th Street end. And that would be recorded once the street vacation is eventually recorded.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the next hand I saw was Councilmember Bangs, and I did record that Councilmember Martinelli raised his hand. So I will call on you in the appropriate order. Councilmember Martinelli, Councilmember Bangs, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. So Tommy, are we also going to include, as we did before with Recology, where if we have that illegal dumping, which I'm hoping doesn't happen because it's going to be more open, but of course, you never know. But are we making sure we have that in place as well?
I'm not familiar with the Recology aspect of this. I don't know if Brandon or Dan can speak.
Maybe I'll try to answer the question that as I understand it. Yeah, sometimes we use signs at locations that are chronic dumping locations. Yeah, I wish I would love to say that the signs worked, perfectly, but we'll address it. I think the cul-de-sacs, the positive here in all of these is the end of the roads are going to basically shift westward, so into more lit areas, not so much away from the end of the road back in forested areas. Beyond these cul-de-sacs, you'll now have the light rail, which will be running not necessarily 24/7, but a lot of the time. So there'll be what I'm getting at is there might be a lot more eyes at the end of these cul-de-sacs than previously, that we've had historically. And so it's going to look and feel a lot different. But if we have dumping issues, we'll certainly address those as we need to. And signs is one tool, but we'll keep it clean. We'll do our best to keep it clean.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm sorry if this is such a basic question, but does this in any way change or make more challenging if we want to come in later and do something different regarding lighting or other kind of correction to improve safety? I mean, does it change the process in any way?
Would say that it makes the process easier for us because the property rights are more clearly defined. So the right of way that we're vacating is now, Sound Transit's constructed their light rail alignment over the top of it. So we're just kind of cleaning up the property ownership issues per the agreements that we've already entered with Sound Transit. So we'll be able to do lighting at the end of the street that's being provided with the design. One other aspect to keep in mind is through a significant portion of these cul-de-sac ends, there's actually noise walls right at the end of the cul-de-sac as well. So there's a barrier between that and the light rail. There'll be fencing, as Brandon mentioned, new and improved street ends with lighting, curb gutter, sidewalk, and all of that. So it's going to really transform these street ends from what they have been historically.
Thank you.
Councilmember Martinelli.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to state that I do support this ordinance, but I would ask that we do not suspend the rules in order to pass it. If we do that, I would have to vote no. I don't see this as an emergency situation where we would need to suspend those rules. As I've stated before, I think we have those rules in place for a reason. And someone might see this meeting and want to give comment for that second reading, and it would be too late if we pass it today. So that would be my ask, that we do the second reading as is the council rules. And that's all. Thank you.
Okay, are there any more questions from council? Seeing none, I'm sorry. Oh, seeing none, I will now close the public hearing. Is there a motion? I see Councilmember Bang's hand.
I move to suspend City Council Rule 26A in order to adopt a draft ordinance number 21-039 on first reading.
Do I have a second? I see a second from Councilmember Nutting. Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hand until I call your name. Okay, I see Councilmember Nutting, Councilmember Bangs, Councilmember Buxton, Deputy Mayor Mahoney, and myself. All those opposed? I see Councilmember Harris. Councilmember Martinelli, your vote is?
I am opposed.
Passes 5-2. We have a second motion, motion 1. Councilmember Bangs.
I move to enact draft ordinance number 21-039, approving the vacation of certain portions of public rights of way streets known as South 219th Street, South 220th Street, South 221st Street, South 224th Street, and 30th Avenue South, located in the city of Des Moines, and more specifically identified and legally described in draft ordinance number 21-039, and accepting dedication of completed street improvements.
Second.
I see a seconded by Deputy Mayor Mahoney. All those in favor, please raise your hand until I call your name. Councilmember Nutting, Councilmember Bangs, Councilmember Harris, Councilmember Buxton, Deputy Mayor Mahoney, and myself. Councilmember Martinelli, your vote?
Opposed because we suspended the rules.
Okay, this passes 6-1. The motion passes, and we are on to our next public hearing. This is the first reading of draft ordinance number 21-035 related to the zoning code and regulation of emergency housing shelters and permanent supportive housing and transitional housing. The staff presentation will be by our planning and development manager, Denise Lathrop, and I will now open the public hearing. Staff, please give your presentation.
And actually, instead of Denise, it'll be myself. My name is Eric Lane. I am a planner too within the city.
I apologize, Eric. I read the wrong note.
All
so
right.
Thank you. I recognize Eric as land use planner too, giving our presentation. Please go forward.
Thank you. So this again, as mentioned, this is for draft ordinance 21-035 as it relates to the ESS HB 1220 Housing Bill 1220 code update. The background, quick little detail on that. It was passed in May 2021 to address transitional and permanent supportive housing, as well as indoor emergency shelters and indoor emergency housing. The state law preempts all local zoning authority and changes that the city must consider are development and zoning regulations as it relates to emergency and permanent supportive housing, as well as comprehensive plan updates specific towards the housing element. Local control includes occupancy, spacing, and intensity use, as well as the approval process. But beyond that, it's pretty minimal. Next slide. The first provision, that is that cities are required to allow transitional housing and permanent supportive housing in all zones where hotels or residential dwelling units are allowed. Local zoning, again, is preempted by state law. Next slide. The second provision, it relates to indoor emergency shelters and indoor emergency housing. Effective the 30th September this year, a city cannot prohibit in any zones which hotels are allowed, except when permitted in a majority of zones within a 1 mile proximity to transit. Again, reasonable occupancy, spacing, intensity use requirements, those can be imposed as it relates to protection of public health and safety. However, ordinance cannot prevent the siting, though, of sufficient number of these types of housing and shelter types necessary to accommodate each city's projected need. Some of the amendments we're going to discuss, definitions added to 18.101.050. Supportive housing uses and the conditional use permit requirement are added to the permitted uses chart as well. A new section was added that addresses occupancy, spacing, intensity use, and operational requirements for supportive housing uses. And then lastly is parking requirements for supportive housing facilities. That is also added to 18.210. So quick overview of the definitions. First one being moderate income. Many times we have low income or extremely low. So moderate income is at or below 120% of the median household income for a person, family, unrelated persons living together. It is adjusted for household size and for the county where the household is located. Emergency housing means temporary indoor accommodations for individuals or families who are homeless or are imminent risk of becoming homeless. This is addresses the basic health, food, clothing, personal hygiene needs for individuals and families. They may or may not require occupants to enter a lease or occupancy agreement. Emergency shelters. Now, those are facilities that provide a temporary shelter for individuals or families who are currently homeless. They may not require occupancies or occupants to enter into a lease or occupancy agreement. And they can also include day and warming centers that do not provide overnight accommodations. The big one, permanent supportive housing. There is no limited length of stay that prioritizes people who need comprehensive supportive services to retain tenancy and utilizes admissions practices designed to lower barriers to entry that would be typically for other subsidized or unsubsidized rental housing, especially as it relates to rental history, criminal history, personal behaviors. These are often paired with on-site or off-site voluntary services designed to support that person living in the complex or with a disability towards behavioral health or physical health condition and who are experiencing homelessness or at imminent risk of homelessness. They could be to a successful tenant and housing agreement to impose the resident's health status and connect the resident of the housing with community-based health care, treatment, or employment services. It is generally what you see as far as that wraparound services that are offered at some of the housing facilities. And then lastly is transitional housing. And that is a facility that provides housing and supportive services to individuals or families for up to 2 years, with the primary purpose is to enable homeless individuals or families to move into a independent living or permanent housing. So the amendments to specifically the permitted uses table of 18.52, we are adding emergency housing and emergency shelter in all zones that allow hotels. We're adding permanent supportive housing and transitional housing in zones that allow hotels and residential uses. Permanent supportive housing and transitional housing will be limited to 8 residents in a single family residential zone. And then last is we remove the hotels as a permitted use within the RM 900 zone. Some of the new requirements for supportive housing facilities, those include occupancy limits based on type, size, location. Facilities shall be located within a quarter mile of transit. They should be located at least 1/2 mile from another facility. They can be located with at least 1,000 feet from an elementary, middle, or high school or other supportive housing facility unless permitted as a family or youth shelter. Facilities shall meet the bulk and scale requirements of the zone where the facility is located. The project design shall enhance personal safety and security through the implementation of crime prevention through environmental design principles. And the sponsor or managing agency shall ensure compliance with Washington state laws, regulations, our city code, and this King County Health Department regulations. Lastly, an operations plan must be provided at the time of application by the sponsor or managing agency. With that, our suggested motion is motion 1, move to pass draft ordinance number 21-035 to a second reading on September 16th, 2021, or soon thereafter as the matter may be heard. That concludes our presentation.
It's now time for the public comment portion of the hearing. Has anyone signed up to speak?
No, Mayor.
Thank you. Seeing that no one has signed up to speak, Council, do you have any questions? And I believe I saw, okay, I'm going to start again. I saw Councilmember Nutting's hand. I saw Councilmember Buxton, Harris, and Deputy Mayor Mahoney. Let's see. I think I've got everyone. Okay. I will start with Councilmember Nutting.
Thank you, Mayor. My only concern is 1,000 feet from an elementary school. Is that what other jurisdictions are doing? Is that what we can? Is it the farthest we can push them away from? I feel not that I don't have a heart. I just feel that emergency housing could get us into some trouble being located closer to elementary schools and stuff. So that I guess that's my question is that sufficient? And is that what other jurisdictions are doing?
So when we developed our plan amendments and code changes, we considered many of the other cities, Federal Way, Burien, and so forth. So much of what we've designed is pulled from those other agencies. One consideration that we also have is the specific requirement that requires cities to allow the sufficient number of sightings of locations. One concern is by increasing that gap or that distance, we may not permit a required minimum number of sightings, even if it is just one, that 1,000. But again, what that looks like as it relates to a map would take some analysis, and I'll let for Denise or Susan chime in as well.
Thank you, Eric. Yes, and that number could be adjusted. We just do have the limitation, as Eric mentioned, of allowing for a sufficient number of facilities to meet our projected need. But that number is something that the council could decide to adjust.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then that goes to Councilmember Buxton.
Thank you, Mayor. No, my question's been answered. Thank you.
Mayor, can I just add on to that real quick?
Please.
So I just took a look at our temporary homeless encampments, and that currently sets the distance at 1,000 feet as well. So that would align with this. 1,000 feet is kind of a general length that you'll see in a lot of these ordinances, but that's what we have in our temporary homeless encampment.
Okay. At this time, I'm just letting Councilmember Martinelli know that I've seen his hand. The next person I'm calling on is Councilmember Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. Eric, is it possible to get Max or somebody to create a map that indicates, where these appropriate uses might be?
Well, those uses, so to answer your question, yes, a map can be created. Depending on the time and availability of Max and when that would be, I would have to check in with them. But as far as the development of a map, I would also refer to the provisions of minimum state, especially the permanent supportive housing, transitional housing in all residential zones and those that allow hotels, which does cover a significant portion of the community. But within that, we do have other considerations that would impact location and sightings, such as occupancy, spacing, parking requirements. So through those requirements, that can influence the development of sightings, especially as it relates to the necessity of parking, as can be a big determinant of locations.
Okay, colleagues, may I just suggest that it would be extremely—
Councilmember Harris, you need to be in the form of a question at this point in time. You cannot make comments at this time.
Mayor, may I add on to Eric's answer for that? Because one thing that, making a map, it actually isn't that easy, because there are many considerations besides the locational criteria, and it would be very speculative as far as where something could be actually located. We normally in planning world, we try to avoid raising kind of some unnecessary concerns, and when we if we were to try to locate potential areas on a map, the accuracy would really be in question. So it could end up raising concerns that are kind of unnecessarily raised. And I would question how accurate we could be in that type of map.
Okay, and just for clarification of process, because this is a public hearing, there is a designated process to it. After the motion is made, there still will be an opportunity for discussion, but at this time it is questions only. Thank you. The next person's hand was recognized as Deputy Mayor Mahoney.
Thank you, Mayor. This question is most likely for Michael or Anthony Hempstead. Can you tell us a little bit about the process that the state legislature went through? And did they have discussion, any of the representatives with you concerning this legislation?
Go ahead, City Manager Mathias.
Yeah, Anthony, are you on? Do you want to take that?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you hear the question?
Yes. On this legislation, and it was a very controversial piece of legislation. It did get somewhat moderated as it went through the process. The city family was very split. In that Seattle and Tacoma were pushing hard for this legislation. Many other cities and city planners had real concerns about it. But it was there was a considerable push by key legislators, and it did get passed. So it was debated. It did come before AWC, and there was vibrant discussion about it, but very, very split opinions. And I have a very active dog here, so I'm going to go on mute.
All right, did that get your question answered, Deputy Mayor Mahoney?
Not as good as never mind. I have another question. On the portion with policy provided by applicant, is there a possibility of getting an example of what one of those looks like? I see the criteria that has to be put in, but is there a possibility of seeing maybe an example that was filled in form? My concerns are over the crime prevention and so forth listed in the conducts, and I'd like to see what they address, what the ramifications are, some of the actions they'll take. I assume that would be part of this plan that they would submit, and I'd love to see an example. Is that possible to get one?
So we wouldn't have necessarily any specific example at this time, just because it can vary depending on some agencies. Some agencies are much more strict as it relates to one strike, you're out. Others are going to be much more lenient as it relates to kind of a housing first model. So I would hesitate to provide an example, as it could vary by submittal. The benefit to the way we've presented it, I hope, is that it allows us flexibility, especially as it relates to a siting. As we consider, the 1,000-foot distance, if a site is 1,001 feet versus 2,000 feet, there might be considerations that are greater than others as far as it relates to public safety. That being said, I do believe examples do exist in other cities as they are going through similar processes like this. And so it could be something that we might be able to obtain.
Right.
Mayor, I'd like to add to that. So, Deputy Mayor, I think one of the issues in the way this was done, and I think Anthony Hempstead did a good job of characterizing this as being something that was done relatively quickly under a lot of kind of different perspectives as to what should happen. But I think the legislature was committed to making something happen to deal with homelessness and other things. And I think one of the difficult parts, and you'll see Not to get into ARPA tonight at all, but we did make a recommendation for resources for the homeless emergency services. But the development of the housing itself has really got to either come from the private or nonprofit sector. And that is going to be a very delicate process so that people's land values are not negatively affected by the speculation. And I think that's part of what Susan was saying relative to a map, that you do not identify, locations that could undercut the value of land before that's even an option. And so we've actually had some discussions with social service agencies about the possibility of partnering, where the city would help with the comprehensive provision of emergency services, mental health, job, opportunity, whatever it is, to try and enhance and help the people, the residents. But these are issues that really, I think in fairness, we could say the legislature has decided to let the cities figure it out, which is not with no time, and that we need to be on board and, start looking at how we do this. So there's a lot of unanswered questions, and I appreciate the ones that all of you have brought up. Some of these we just don't know, and we'll have to work through them as we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Michael.
The next, I see the second hand for Councilmember Harris, but the next to speak is Councilmember Martinelli.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a comment, so I will wait until it's that period to make comments.
Okay. Councilmember Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. Eric, so the definition of moderate varies depending on the number of people in the house, occupants?
Yes. So, go ahead. Sorry.
No. So like for 4 people.
Yeah.
Moderate.
So it's based off what's known as area median income, and that can vary on household size. 2 people, dual income, obviously would be a higher average median income than what be a single person. They don't differentiate though between 4 adults and 2 kids, or 1 adult and 3 kids. So it is something that can be not fully representative, but is the most accurate way that we can as far as measurements within the census data to kind of do estimations of the household income.
No, that's great. I just wondered if you had like a specific example for Des Moines, just.
Of median income.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't, unfortunately, not at this time, but it would be something we can pull.
The other thing is there anywhere on the city website that describes this CPTED as it would apply to our community? Or is it just, this general principle kind of a thing, or?
I'll have to refer to Susan or Denise on that process.
City manager.
Yeah, thank you. So CPTED is something that the city has employed for a number of years, which involves our police department being part of a design review for projects to identify and make sure that visual corridors exist, appropriate lighting exists, appropriate security exists. So it's an integral part of how we go about doing development. And it's usually referred to CPTED. I like people to spell out the acronym. Thank you for doing that, Eric. But CPTED is a very common term within City Hall and within the community relative to development. And if Susan or Denise want to add on to that, please feel free.
Yeah, City Manager Matthias answered that. We commonly use that review process for all of our developments. And I think, Denise, do you know if there is something on our website specifically that describes that process?
We have descriptions in the Marina District Design Guidelines and the Pacific Ridge Design Guidelines, but there's actually a website that have these CPTED principles. And then we have a couple people in the police department who have also undergone the CPTED training. So they're the ones that actually are looped into a design review on a particular project, and they provide that review and comments if necessary.
Thank you, Denise.
Thank you.
Okay. At this point, I just had one question, and I just think that it's worth noting for the record. When the state passed this, was it required that we adopt these policies, and by what date?
So it was more of an effective date that these policies became in effect. And as a result, through the also advice from our own legal, is that without having any sort of conditions or code in place, we are kind of a wild west. It's open for whatever placements as long as they're meeting the state requirements for that degree. So to my understanding is that by doing this, we are allowing some degree of control prior to the effective date or at the effective date.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Mahoney, your second hand.
Thank you. One more question. Would you be, and I just want to ask it, do you believe that you've done whatever you can legally to best protect this community with this legislation that we're going to have to live with?
Yeah, I would say that what we've done is present this in the most effective way to ensure not just public safety and health, but also that if this siting does go into place, wherever it may be, that it be done in an effective manner to where it's a successful location. I would suggest that if anybody is kind of curious of what this might look like, there are locations, one known as the Nativity House in Tacoma. And they've done a very nice job as far as the design aspects and how it looks and the streetscape and safety around. So there are examples that this is effective and safe. And I think that's what we've done here is focus on where it can be most effective.
Thank you.
I'll take my second shot. Eric, Nativity House, who paid for that?
That was, I believe, Catholic Community Services. So it is a nonprofit. And one thing to mention is with many of these sites, it is highly dependent on location of number of places and units. And so one thing to consider is the parking and siting restrictions that we have do kind of influence it in certain areas that allows us to kind of ensure that it is a transit safe and effective location.
Okay. Seeing that the questions have been asked, I will now close the public hearing. We have a motion to pass draft ordinance number 21-035 to a second reading on September 16th, or as soon as possible thereafter as the matter may be heard. Councilmember Nutting.
So moved, Mayor.
Thank you. And I will second it. At this point, we are now open for discussion because I think there were people who wanted to make a comment. The first would be Councilmember Martinelli. Hang on a second, and then I'm counting hands. Then I saw Councilmember Bangs, Councilmember Buxton, Councilmember Harris. Okay, and we'll go with that at this point. So I will start by recognizing Councilmember Martinelli.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say that I think it's unfortunate that we have council members implying that affordable or emergency housing is a danger to our kids and students. Research has continually debunked that line of thinking. I feel that we should do everything we can to establish as much affordable housing as necessary to take care of our community and not base decisions on unnecessary fear. That's all.
Councilmember Bangs.
Thank you, Mayor. We've been involved with many cities and we've been involved with many issues around what's been going on with homelessness for as long as I can remember. And I believe that we were all committed to that fact that we needed to be involved. We have to understand that some homelessness is not by choice, some is. A lot of homelessness is not necessarily mental health or drug addiction, but it is working people unable to afford someplace to live. So we did agree as a city council, that we would work with and do the best we could with the cities that we were working with. Now, granted, given what Anthony said, and we know all of the controversy around what happened and what is quote unquote sort of jammed down our throats, but we're a better city than that, and we'll figure it out. And I believe Eric and Susan and our attorneys and the city manager did the best job they can. But I would say this: it is not a crime to be homeless. It is not a crime to have your children in a car. What is a crime is that this is happening. This is a crime, and it's across this country. It's our responsibility as citizens. And I'm just like everybody else. I don't want my home value to go down, but I want families to be able to be protected and be safe in their homes. They don't have a home. Those who are able to then provide one for them through whatever it is, transitional or short-term living, to eventually be able to get on their feet. That's what we should be all about. So, I would say that, yeah, we have some that are probably going to be problematic, but we also have the police department, the health, the wraparound health services that we're going to be putting in place. We aren't the ones building these transitional homes. We aren't the ones building these units, and we will work with those nonprofit, or hopefully not for profit, but nonprofit, to help out where we can. It's our obligation. It's our duty. I don't care what our income level is, where we are in our status in life. It's our obligation to reach back and help these families and individuals. And that's my comment.
Okay, next one is Councilmember Buxton.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to comment on my my appreciation for the staff and really getting on the ball with this. There was a very short window with a very detailed task list. If we were going to take advantage of this open window to do what we could to have input into this process. So it's not just about fear, but it's also about I wanted to say there was detail in review and in amendments, incredible amount of detail where amendment affected amendment, which affected another amendment and another and another. Just a long line, and quick completion of SEPA, communication with Commerce, notices and scheduling of hearings to make sure that we have the opportunity to have the kind of input into this that we wanted. And so speaking to, for example, standards, some of these standards don't just create safety for neighbors and neighborhoods, but for the residents that will reside in these buildings with the kind of wraparound services that we're asking or requiring to make sure, like Eric said, was a little bit of a Wild West. And what we've done here, what our staff has just hustled and taking the opportunity to bring some order to this, at least as much as we could, to our city. And so I want to hats off and kudos to them for hustling and making sure that we got all this done in the timeline we needed to. So thank you.
Councilmember Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. So I would ask that the city put some kind of CPTED, CPTED document on the website, just so the public can look at it before the next hearing to educate themselves. And I would also, I understand the obvious concerns with the map kind of thing, but I would also push back slightly and say that we have to kind of normalize moderate or affordable housing. It's just, the subtext is that it somehow, because it's conflated with homelessness, somehow all of this jazz is rolled into one ball. It makes it toxic for people. And I think that by making it, just making the discussion more like, hey, these these structures can be successful. They're not going to threaten you, and that we are committed to their success. You just can't, because otherwise, if you basically hide, it makes it a hide the ball kind of a deal. If you try to keep things on the down low as much as possible, it creates more fear, I think. And at some point, this stuff has to become normalized. People cannot freak out just because there is a less than full market rate dwelling, going up down the street from them. And we got to do something psychologically to project that message, in my opinion. So that's it.
City Manager Matthias. You're on mute. There you go.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of comments. So philosophically, I agree word for word with Councilmember Banks. And I think what's really lacking here that we see every single day is that this is not a Des Moines issue. It's not a King County issue. It's a national issue. And we need national resources put toward its solution. Very difficult for smaller communities like ourselves to effectively address all the issues associated with homelessness. And yet there is no other way to address them. You cannot do a partial job. You can't provide housing and not provide health care, right? You get the kids in, and now you need childcare for the mom who potentially could work or is already working. There's a lot to all of this, but I would just remind us that we did put DevCo in place, 330 units of affordable housing. We did support the development of the Adriana. That's another 90 units for fixed income seniors. I think one of the more interesting aspects about this is, we're building up our economic development, and that means our retail sector. And so a number of the people that work in the retail sector do not make significant money to afford rents in Des Moines. So they commute from Puyallup or from wherever. That's not healthy for the city. It's not healthy for the planet, and it's not healthy for them. So if we can provide affordable housing, even for retail workers, and some of the affordable housing, depending on whether you're at low, median income, middle, or high, could include firefighters and teachers and kinder care folks and all that. And that's what this is all about. But I'm just saying, strategically and to be effective, we're going to partner with some social service agencies to try and move forward in this front. But it's exceedingly difficult without resources that come from the state or the federal government to address this in a manner that's effective. And that's going to be our ongoing challenge, and we're going to do everything we can to accomplish that. But just so we know what we're dealing with, we have 32,000 people. We don't have huge valuations in the city relative to resources, but we will do the best that we can. And I can't tell you how frustrating it is to know what the right thing to do is and to not have the resources to do it.
Thank you, Michael. Councilmember Banks, you're a very articulate person, and you nailed it tonight. I fully support the points that you made. I also support the comments made by City Manager Matthias, because it's very difficult. And I think the staff has done an excellent job and not just in the time frame, because it wasn't like they rushed it. They did move rather quickly, but when you rush something, sometimes you skip over, you do things lightly. They didn't do that. They nailed it. They did the best they could for us. I think, as Michael pointed out, this community has always had a heart to try and do the best thing we could with the resources we have available. And that is why we supported DevCo and the Adriana and CMAR in their development. And we have done this has been our MO. But we've always been mindful of concerns because sometimes with the good comes the difficult. And we know that. The thing that bothers me the most about this is not the deal. It's the fact that this is an override to city rights. Nobody tried to work with us on this. They just said, we're going to push this one through. And everybody talks transparency these days. We hear about it, people are waking up to some of the things going on in the marina. They want to know what's going on, and yet they know nothing about this that could happen next door to them. And they didn't have really the opportunity to have a voice. So when we talk about transparency, this is the perfect example of, in my opinion, lack of transparency. It was rushed through at a state level and pushed down to everybody else to figure out. Now, I'm not saying we won't figure it out. I'm not saying we're not going to do the right thing. I'm just saying that that's where where I'm hearing experienced council people say, this is where I have my concerns. And I too have that. And I hope that anybody listening to us tonight will write to their legislature and their legislator and let them know they would have liked to have had their voice heard. I understand the issue and we'll do the best we can, as evidenced by the work that has been presented here tonight. But we need to, as a city government, be able to work with these other entities and manage our city and care for our community with our community. This doesn't really allow this, but we're going to figure it out because, again, it was what we were handed. We will figure it out. With that, Councilmember Harris has a second comment.
And I'm sorry, just 20 seconds. I'm being rhetorical here. What I find frustrating about the legislation, the whole discussion is like either market rate or this other end of the spectrum. And it would just be nice if there was some discussion where you could create housing that was like 4 times the density of a lot of development that's in the middle. Okay, and all the discussion seems to either be at one end or the other. My houses and many houses are like 1,500, 1,400 square feet, and they have been perfectly fine, and they're very popular. And there's got to be a way to increase density for people who are making a living wage, but don't need something 3,000 square feet. So. Okay, thank you.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion to pass draft ordinance 21035 to a second reading on September 16th or as soon thereafter as the matter may be heard, please raise your hand until I call your name. See Councilmember Nutting, Councilmember Banks, Councilmember Harris, Councilmember Buxton, Councilmember Mahoney, or Deputy Mayor Mahoney, I apologize, and myself. Councilmember Martinelli, your vote is?
I'm in support.
Okay, this passes 7-0, and we are moving forward to new business. Okay, we have draft ordinance number 21-042 establishing a special revenue fund entitled American Rescue Plan Act Fund. And we have a staff presentation by our Deputy Finance Director, Jeff Friend.
And Mayor, I'm going to usurp a little bit of time here. Just to emphasize for council, what Jeff's going to talk about is developing a specific fund, a new fund, which we need council approval to do, for the ARPA money, which we'll talk about on September 16th. And the plan, once again, if council has recommendations, please get them to us by close of business next Tuesday, the 7th. We will then compile those into a binder and distribute them to council at the latest, the beginning of that next week of the council meeting. So you can see every request that has been made and assess its value. And then the council may have a discussion about what those recommendations are. But tonight, I would just want to emphasize, and this is a function of leadership of Beth Ann, our finance director, and of Jeff, our deputy finance director, in terms of enhancing transparency and accountability by establishing a clear line item sort of mechanism to review receipts from ARPA, the amount of money we've received, and expenditures associated with ARPA that they are funding, so that all of that is completely transparent, not commingled with other funds, and available for anyone to look at any time. So with that, Jeff, turn it over.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. And I don't know, maybe I should just say what Michael said. I'm Jeff Friend, the Deputy Finance Director. So basically the background is in March, of course, the American Rescue Plan Act was passed, and the city of Des Moines, through that act, received just over $9 million. We've received half of those funds in June of this year, and then half are expected to be in next year. And like Michael mentioned, having them in one fund on the general ledger, make sure they're not commingled with other items that are on the general ledger and the general fund, and it's the most transparent way to have the information. But on top of that as well is we're going to probably be creating financial reports, and having everything isolated in one spot on the general ledger makes that very efficient and easy to do. And like I said, that enhances the transparency. So our recommendation is that the council would adopt this ordinance that would isolate that in Fund 114, the American Rescue Plan Act. So that's it. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you. Motion number one associated with this is to suspend Council Rule 26A in order to enact the draft ordinance 21-042 on first reading. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
By Councilmember Bangs, seconded by Councilmember Nutting. All those in favor, please raise your hand until I call your name. Okay, I've got Councilmember Nutting, Councilmember Bangs, Councilmember Buxton, Deputy Mayor Mahoney, and myself. Opposed? I see Councilmember Harris, Councilmember Martinelli, your vote?
I am opposed.
Okay. Passes 5-2. Okay, that takes us forward to the second motion, and that's to adopt draft ordinance 20-42, adding a new section in DMMC Chapter 3.51, establishing a special revenue fund entitled the American Rescue Plan Act Fund. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Councilmember Nutting. Is there any discussion? I see, okay. All right, so I see Councilmember Harris, Councilmember Martinelli, and Deputy Mayor Mahoney. Okay, so we'll start with Councilmember Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. Is there any, since we only have half the money now, is there any limitation on, waiting to spend this until we have the other half? Or, yeah.
Well, Councilmember Harris, this motion that's on the table is really just to dedicate a line item within the budget so we can account for it. The spending discussion will come on September 16th.
No, I understand that. I'm just asking for sort of the ground rules of, if this is just an accounting question.
I'm just trying to keep us on track with the particular item. This is, again, we are to add a new section. So I respect your question, but it's out of context.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Martinelli.
Thank you, Mayor. I think that this is a great idea. I totally support the fund, and I think that it is a way to increase transparency in this issue, or with the ARPA funding, but I'm going to vote against it unless we don't suspend the rules. Again, I don't see a reason to suspend the rules if it's not an emergency. We have that in place for a reason. I think every time we suspend it, we're pushing down the ability for the public to give input, even if nobody did. There's a reason we have that rule. So I do support the fund. I will vote against it since we're suspending the rules.
Deputy Mayor Mahoney.
Thank you, Mayor. I think in some cases, suspending the rule works because it saves the staff time. It saves everybody time. It makes sense. This is one of those particular ones. What we just recently saw was an example of where you push it to a second reading. This, by establishing an account where we can, no matter what we decide as a council, where we're going to spend this money, we have a way to account for it. And we get ahead of that right now rather than behind. It just makes sense to do today and doesn't waste anybody's time. It gets us to go where we were going to be when we would have voted on this on the next one anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All those in favor, please raise your hand until I call your name. Okay, I have Councilmember Nutting, Councilmember Bangs, Councilmember Buxton, Deputy Mayor Mahoney, and myself. Opposed?
I'm opposed.
Okay, I see Councilmember Harris and verbally Councilmember Martinelli. It passes 5-2. Okay, motion passes. This takes us forward to introduction of items for future consideration. I see Deputy Mayor Mahoney. And
Yes.
okay, so hang on. I see, my apologies, Deputy Mayor Mahoney. And I have Councilmember Nutting. Okay, I will start.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Sorry, I preempted you. I just have one thing. We have a gentleman in town, a young man named Dayton Druskowski. He has just achieved his Eagle Scout. What's special about he and his family are they have been to all of our veterans events. You might remember his sister sang the national anthem, and he orchestrated all the scouts and led them through the flag ceremony. So he's had a particular involvement in this community, and he's done many more things. And I sent a letter to Bonnie that can be forwarded out to the council. But my request is we do something official in this regard for his ceremony on September 18th.
I will support that. And I do feel that it's meaningful to recognize those who do contribute to the city. And it's also, I mean, we've recognized Eagle Scouts. That's a very high level and very difficult level for a young person to achieve. And we have, through partnerships with Scouts, that's how we paved some of our park trails and everything else. So I too am in favor of that. I see Councilmember Nutting nodding. I see a hand from Councilmember Buxton. You're also in favor of it? Is that what you're indicating? You're muted. I can't.
I have a question about it or a recommendation. So when it's appropriate for that, let me know. May I ask the question right now? So what would you think, you didn't recommend anything specific, Deputy Mayor, what would you think about a Spirit of Des Moines award? I can't remember if we've amended our schedule for that, but I think that is something that we consider in the fall. And that might be a nice consideration unless you want to present or do something on a particular day coming up in a couple of weeks.
The Spirit of Des Moines Awards is something where a group of citizens and a few council members that are liaisons determine leaders in the community. That's presented by the city. It's a little different than this. This is kind of a special designation. I thought more in the lines of not necessarily a proclamation, but a recognition, official recognition from the city council of his achievement. More of an official statement in that regard.
And all I can say is, it also, even if we had the green light on the Spirit of Des Moines Award, we wouldn't be able to get the award in enough time. We did recognize, I've looked into this, we did recognize our Eagle Scouts with a certificate And through working with the city clerk's office, we can get that done and present that in a timely manner. And I think that would be an appropriate recognition of this, especially given the family and the things that they do in the community, especially for veterans. So do I have the support of, let me just put it this way, all those in favor of us moving ahead with a certificate or letter of sorts, please raise your hand and let me call your name. Okay, Councilmember Nutting, Councilmember Banks, Councilmember Harris, Councilmember Buxton, Deputy Mayor Mahoney, and myself, Councilmember Martinelli.
I'm support.
Okay, that passes 7-0, so that moves forward.
Thank you, everybody. That's what I had.
Councilmember Nutting.
Yeah, mine's really quick. I've been to several events lately in the last several weeks, and I've seen the community engagement not as fruitful as we would like. And I'm thinking that a banner that Parks and Rec, when they go out places or whoever else, that says free community event would draw people in, maybe if it was bilingual, or just specific free community event that they could hang on some of the shelters that we've been at, would just help immensely draw the community in, because they just, some of them don't get the literature, some of them don't get the knocking on the doors and that kind of thing. So I just hoping that that's something we could figure out how to do through Parks and Rec or whatever it is that anybody doing a free community event through the city could use.
I see a hand from Councilmember Harris.
Thank you, Councilmember Nutting. This is something I've been bugging about for a long time. Yes, all of these public announcements should be in Vietnamese, Spanish, Somali, or Amharic. I guess people can read both those. Those seem to be the top spoken languages. Absolutely.
So it's being proposed that we ask staff to create a banner to communicate free community events that can be used in a multitude of locations to make sure that people see it. I'm not sure what this would look like, because do you put it up the day of, or do you put it up a few days, and do they have Velcro dates that go on it and so forth? So my recommendation would be that we ask the staff to consider a design. There's probably an example somewhere that they have come across. But
Agreed, and because I'm largely involved with the National Night Out at Midway Park, they have banners that you can purchase for every year, and that's great. But I've also been at some other events that, you know, there's community walking around looking, wondering what's going on, and would probably participate, that we could draw in and get more information to. And so, yeah, agreed. If staff has some recommendations, if staff has some ideas, if there's something out there, I'm all for it. I just want to get the ball rolling on this to get more participation with some of the things that we have going on.
So if I could, and Councilmember Nutting, since this was your idea, I don't want to put words into what you're thinking, but what I'm hearing is that what would be a good recommendation is to put it before staff to look into options for to develop a banner that could be used to advertise free community events and encourage support or participation.
Absolutely, and even if it goes up the day of, yeah, I think you're going to get more support than you do without it.
Okay, but I want to leave it to, it could say, you know, free event here today or whatever, but I think the professional team will come up with the right example, especially because they can use examples and find out what other cities have and so forth. So providing that direction, all those in favor of moving that forward, please raise your hand. Okay. And I believe Councilmember Martinelli, I saw your hand up. So instead of rattling off everybody's name, let me say all council members had their hand up supporting this. Okay.
Thank you very much.
And I will leave it to City Manager Matthias or our Chief Strategic Officer, Susan Cesar, to figure out who the right people are to work on that and where you'll get that information and how you get that together. Size, dimensions, all that is in your hands, not ours. Okay. All right. This takes us forward to board and committee reports and council member comments. Tonight, we will start with Councilmember Martinelli.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I want to apologize to the public for the lack of video. My camera stopped working right before the meeting, and I didn't really have time to figure out what the issue was. My only comment is I just want to encourage people to reach out to the council, citycouncil@DesMoinesWA.gov, and please give input, give proposals, give ideas that you have on how we should spend the federal funds that we have in our account and the other money that we have coming. As Councilmember Harris has pointed out, this is by far the largest influx of money the city has ever received, and will probably be the largest that we ever receive for a very long time to come. The proposals we've gotten, many of them have been excellent, but I really just want to encourage the public to be as involved in this process as possible. It's incredibly important, and the decisions that are made will likely have an impact on the city for many years, maybe decades. That's all the comment I have for today. Thank you.
Councilmember Bangs.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, we had National Night Out. That went very well. I didn't get a chance to go to a lot of places, but it was well received. We had a Midway Park event on the 7th of August. Summer concerts, the last one was on the 11th. Theater in the Park was canceled. And then Uncover Des Moines walking tour was on August the 10th in collaboration with King County Library System. And of course, our sculpture program is ongoing. Squidorama is the 11th, not the 11th, but 11/13. I also had an opportunity to attend, and I'm sure Councilmember Nutting will talk more about this. Lila and Natalie Nutting implemented a lemonade sale for SR3, and that was very well attended. I didn't really have any other committee meetings, but I'm sure the month of September will be very different. So that concludes my report.
Thank you. That sends us over to Councilmember Nutting.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, just to elaborate really quick on Councilmember Bangs, my girls did hold their annual lemonade stand. They didn't get to last year, but they did this year, and they set a goal of $1,000 for SR3, and thanks to the wonderful support of the community, they hit their goal and doubled it. So they raised $2,000 to donate to SR3. They had 16 sea lion pups at the time, and it takes quite a bit to feed those animals and get them rehabilitated and back out into the waters. And it also shot them over the $10,000 mark for their annual lemonade stand. So they've raised $11,000 for the community over the last 5 years. So I just thanks for the community support with that, and thanks to my girls. I wanted to start out by thanking staff, the planners around town. Obviously with COVID, we haven't been traveling outside, and we've been in town more. The planters have been absolutely amazing this year. Stunning. What a great addition to the city to be able to drive around town and see these beautiful planters. They've done an awesome job this year. To dovetail on Councilmember Bangs too, National Night Out was a huge success at Midway Park. We handed out 75 whole pizzas. We kind of skirted what the health organization was telling us to do. So we handed out full pizzas to family members, and it also was in accordance with the Parks Master Plan. It was a great attendance, and that's where my free community event idea came from. I also wanted to remind people that Federal Way School District school started yesterday, and Highline Public Schools started today. And as I do on the council meeting after school started, just to remind people to slow down. It's 20 miles an hour through there. You have a lot larger chance of surviving being hit by 20 miles an hour as you do at 35. And kids are near and dear to my heart. So please just watch your speed for anybody that's watching. And please remember to tell your cohorts to watch their speed. I wanted to thank Arts Commission for the concerts in the park. They didn't really have a huge amount of time to throw these events together, and managed to make it a huge success. And as far as we know, not a super spreader event. So the family and I enjoyed those. And I think that's pretty much it, Mayor. Thank you. That concludes my remarks.
Thank you. Councilmember Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to make a little note about this ARPA thing. We've all received many wonderful suggestions, but I just want to point out that we don't necessarily have to spend this. Just throwing it out there, that we don't actually have to decide. We could hold off. I've spoken with a bunch of residents about marina redevelopment, and I am glad that they showed up. Thank you, thank you. I also want to thank Eagle Scout Drzkowski. Man, this is really a great letter we all received. It's just really, I'm very, very impressed. Okay, so I attended the start, and I attended the second airport sighting thing called CAC. And I've had meetings with a number of people, Senator Wilson, Senator Kaiser, port commissioners, about demand. The thing that never gets discussed regarding the airport is the demand side. It seems like, for whatever reason, like that's never part of any discussion. But the truth is, we spent the last year on Zoom and doing remote stuff, and the number of flights went down and the world kept on spinning. And it's sort of like carpooling, in that you could imagine a world where there were less flights and everybody would be just fine with it. But for whatever reason, that is not discussed, and it kind of should be. And I'll just close by saying that along those lines, we got all of the flurry of letters about Steve Edmiston proposing an airport department. And thank you to the public. I just want to also mention, the public isn't aware of the process, but I sent in a proposal on August the 1st to do something similar, a little different, but I will ask you to support that. I will publish it in detail because frankly, this is the issue that I ran on, was to try to make a difference on airport stuff after so many years of frustration. And I would ask the public to trust me on this. Thank you.
Councilman Buxton.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, my colleagues have mentioned pretty much most of the events. There were several community events that have happened over the last 5 or 6 weeks. And it's been a marvelous experience to see the community come out and, in my opinion, safely, but interacting with each other and enjoying the summer here in Des Moines. And when we talk about creating a destination community, I'm telling you, every time I go down to, whether it's the boardwalk and take a walk down there, or the marina, down and seeing the sailboats, I feel like I'm on vacation for just a few minutes while I'm down there. And I have seen our residents act like that. Like they're enjoying themselves on vacation with each other. And I have appreciated that, whether it's been music in the park, Blues and Brews, theater in the park, Cruise Des Moines. That was a great little spontaneous organic event where a bunch of people got together and cruised cool vehicles down. And it was done with taste, and families, little kids. The market, I have appreciated being outside in the sun with my community. So thank you for attending all of these events and coming out and being safe and kind to each other. The one committee that I would like to mention just quickly is Soundside Alliance for Economic Development. I'm on the board. That's a consolidation of a few cities around our partner cities, with also the Port of Seattle and Highland College and the Chamber. And we talked a little bit about ARPA, and I just also wanted to encourage us, all of the things that we're considering, the impact, the feedback that we're getting from the community, but the draft that was presented to us on our staff, our sister cities are all considering almost the exact same things. And I've also been doing, research of regional cities from, Everett to Olympia and down south, down to, Vancouver, all of these cities, we're all considering very similar expenditures for this resources coming into our city. So that's all I have for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then we have Deputy Mayor Mahoney.
Thank you, Mayor. I also would agree with the comments about the American Rescue Act. I just want to say this, it's like, if you won $1 million, what would you do with it? And there's a lot of things that could be done. I want to make sure we do things well with the money we get. As a lot of people said, this is unprecedented and may never see it again. But I asked the community too, be above one issue. Think of many, and let's look at solutions together and not just pin down to just one particular thing. I've been reading all your correspondence. I saw some that were very comprehensive and then some that were very specific to an issue. And I welcome them all, but it will be a difficult task. I guess it's a good problem to have in a lot of regards. So I ask for people to think about it and be in the mindset to compromise. That's not saying what we're going to do or where we're going to go with it. It's just there's a lot of great suggestions and there's only so much in the pot. Real quick update. So I had a legislative agenda pre-meeting for the skateboard. And I want you all to know that the aftermarket muffler and banning sales and installation, along with vehicle banning, has been very well received in that group as far as our legislative agenda, just like we'd want to do in the Des Moines one. And had a quick conversation with Tina Orwell discussing the matter, and she seems to be on board as well. So I'm optimistic. I want to thank Rotary. They had the Blues and Brews this past weekend. They raised over $100,000. Michael, the president of Rotary, wanted to personally thank you for all of your assistance and your crew's assistance. We had, on the next day, we had
any relation? Any relation?
Yeah, well, she's a lot better looking than I am, that's for sure. And she traded down, I traded up. Anyway, we, on the next day, was something just as exciting. Mount Rainier High School rented the parking lot where the farmers market usually goes, and they had Ram Fest there, something they want to build on tradition. And it was great to be able to speak to, I don't know, there was probably about 100 people there. It's a lot of student athletes. I can't pretend that I didn't give Mr. Nutting, Councilmember Nutting, a little ribbing that one of his kids was actually in high school. And by the way, you got two outstanding children. I know you and Yvonne think so. Just want to say that. But Coach Mack did a wonderful job of trying to build an effort to build community with our local schools. And with that said, I want to remind people Friday at Highline High School, the Mount Rainier Rams will be playing against Silas High School out of Tacoma, their first victory of many. They've almost assured us a state championship, I like to say. But one of the things we committed as a council was to try to rally our community to show up to the games. And with that being said, the other high school that's in our community is Federal Way High School. Now this week they'll be playing at Mount Si, a very tough game. But next week they'll be home against Beamer. So if you get the opportunity, go out and support them as well. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Council, you're a tough act to follow. You guys have covered everything. So I'm just going to touch on a few things. Community lost another good person. We unfortunately received news of the passing of Al Isaac. Al Isaac and his wife Kathy lived in this community for quite some time. He was a retired vet, and I apologize. I don't know the rank he retired at, but I do know it was a senior rank. He was a former president of Rotary, and with his wife Kathy, they volunteered for almost everything in the city until Parkinson's prevented him from doing any more. At that point, they decided to relocate to Arizona to be with Kathy's family, and that's where Al had the remainder of his years. He will be missed. On the bright side, and there was a bright side, although I'm a little choked up, I'm sure these individuals I'm about to mention may be as well. We had some council birthdays, and I think it's really important to recognize that Councilmember Buxton and Councilmember Mahoney are a year older than they were last time we met. So anyway, happy birthday to the two of you.
Well, there's somebody else who's coming up next week.
I don't know who you speak of.
Keep trying to catch up to you. That's all I'm saying.
You got some running to do. Okay, well, with that, folks, wow. Unbelievable. Yes. With that, folks, we are at the end of our meeting tonight. Our next meeting will be our budget retreat on September 16th, and I am looking for a motion to adjourn. I see Councilmember Nutting.
So moved.
I see a second. Nice. Okay, I have a motion by Councilmember Nutting, and I have a second by both Councilmember Bangs, Deputy Mayor Mahoney, and I saw their hands too. So anyway, with that, all those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. I will call your name. Well, actually, I don't have to. Everybody's hand is up, and that's been confirmed by our city clerk. So we are adjourned. You guys have a safe holiday weekend, and we'll